Okay. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Great. That's great to hear. So my day job is at the University of Michigan. I'm an assistant professor, and I teach students and do research. But just recently, I have been hired by National Geographic Society to do research primarily on how do we create more emotional connections with the natural world. So that's something that I have been working in the past year. And of course, I've been also brought in to advise some of their global campaigns to make it mostly culturally specific. So that's something that I've been honored to join recently. So this was last year, and Andy Refkin and I were at this stage doing the panel on making the case for nature. So my focus has been about communicating the natural world with people so that we can get people to care more about nature. All right, so I want you to close your eyes just for a second. I'll let you know when you can open your eyes. And I want you to think about the Earth and imagine that you are drawing the Earth that is undergoing and experiencing global warming. Does everybody have an image of the Earth? Please nod if you do. Yes? Okay, now you can open your eyes. Okay, so how many of you have the Earth that had faces or any facial expressions? Excellent, excellent. So we have some individuals who had those faces. And this is exactly what the researchers did with the idea that how do we humanize and anthropomorphize nature? So the researchers asked the university students to draw the same Earth. And some of the individuals draw it this way, whilst other individuals draw it this way, which is so interesting, right? And they found that the students who draw the Earth with facial expressions, eyes and nose and mouth and specific facial expressions, ended up having more emotional connection with nature, and they were also more likely to engage in conservation behavior. So this is a good example of how we can use psychological insights to lead to better behavior change. So that's one example, and at the heart of anthropomorphism, there is mind perception, and that is what I am going to talk about. Mind perception is consisted of two things, what I call, or what the researchers call, agency versus experience. Agency is essentially your capacity to think, plan, and control yourself. And experience is essentially feeling. It's about your capacity to feel hunger, fear, et cetera, et cetera. So this is feeling and this is thinking. And those two dimensions are quite important in terms of how we think about morality. And so, of course, as humans, you're up there. Of course, as humans, you're full of yourself. You believe that, of course, you have mind, right? You have high on agency and high on experience as well. But when it comes to animals, as you can see, they're on this side. They're more like babies in that they're high on experience, so they're capable of feeling, but they're less capable of agency, and that's what the research has found so far. And why do I bring this up? Because thinking that the Earth has a mind, or a cow that has a mind, has important implications for how we think about consuming meat, for example. So once we believe that the Earth has mind, we feel more guilty about doing something, doing harm on the Earth. So let me just skip ahead. So now we established that mind perception is the essence of morality. And morality has typically two dimensions of what and who. So what involves help versus harm, and who involves agent versus patient, right? So I'll just give you a moment to kind of think through this 2x2 table. Typically, when we communicate animals, we tend to focus on this dimension, right? This particular quadrant of seeing animals as moral victims. right? So they're victims that are helpless, and therefore this is supposed to evoke sympathy and sadness. And I'm not saying that this quadrant is wrong. It is very, very effective in inducing people's emotions, right? So that is very, very important. But I felt like there's a missed opportunity in tapping into the other quadrants, especially this quadrant is the one that I'm going to talk about. So what if we can envision animals as moral heroes, such that we can inspire humans and elevate them and help them experience awe? So that is something that I've been doing research on. And this, I don't know how many of you recognize this. This is Japanese snow monkey. And just like me, he enjoys being in hot springs. And most recently, he was photographed by a photographer, the traveling photographer that he picked up on a tourist's iPhone and started to play with different buttons. So he's very, very smart. So I was thinking about maybe one way to communicate animals is that maybe we can give them more agency and communicate that they have human-like capacity and traits. So in the experimental study, I wanted to focus on animal culture, which is what scientists recently and for the decades discovered that animals may have local culture, that they are capable of transmitting knowledge with each other such that they can develop their own culture. And so maybe if we communicate that with the audience, maybe they will think that animals are smarter than they think they were. And so we used this example of cranes and did an experiment with them. So the first condition was just a control condition. So we gave a generic description of the crane, which is the target animal in this one, and there was no video with that one. Second condition had no narration, but just had a video of cranes. And third condition had a neutral narration. The most important one is the fourth condition, which had the cultural narration that depicts animals as having the capacity to have a culture and learning from each other. So I'm going to show you a 1-minute video of what that video involved. Could you please play that video? Thank you.
Every autumn and spring, different species of crane crisscross the world on migration. Some, like the Eurasian crane shown here, make a potentially perilous journey from southeastern China to breed in the Russian Arctic. Young birds learn these migration routes from following the older birds, and migration routes can be therefore shaped by the knowledge of successive generations of birds. When this knowledge is lost, it can be hard to regain. However, not all hope is lost. In the reintroduction program for the endangered whooping crane that migrates from Wisconsin to Florida, conservation scientists have successfully taught young birds where to go by training them to follow microlight aircraft that they then use to fly with them en route.
So now you know what it was like for you to watch the video. All right, so as a result of watching this video, as you can see, the mind perception ratings for experience dimension was higher for the cultural narration condition than the control condition. And as for the agency, it also increased significantly from the control condition. So now people believe that cranes may be capable of feeling and thinking. And more interestingly, this was really interesting to me, a lot of people believe that humans are superior to animals, right? And we found that as a result of learning about cranes being capable of having a mind, the cultural narration condition had this reduction in belief in human superiority over non-human animals. And they were more likely to identify with nature as a result. And so that was an important implication of this study, that maybe there is something special about communicating that animals are actually smarter than we think they were. All right, so this is just a funny image of an example that depicts animals as moral heroes. This is an elephant saving the puppy. Obviously, this was photographed, not photographed, photoshopped. Yes, photoshopped, thanks. And so maybe we could use these examples of animals as moral heroes more often to give people a little bit more sense of self-efficacy instead of viewing animals as someone who is helpless. Maybe we can give a little bit more hope by doing so. So that was an example. And lastly, I want to invite you to rethink the polar bears, not the drinks, but the actual animal polar bears. This is the most iconic image that people think about when they think about climate change. But I'm not sure if this is the best image that we should be using in communicating climate change especially with younger generations. And so that is something that I would like to invite you to continue to think about. I also want to conclude that maybe this is time for us to think about our fight as if like we're joining not as if we're joining the fight for animals, but as if we're joining the fight with animals. So thank you so much.